Hey everyone, my name is Josh, and you're listening to Cyber Conversations. We're going to have a show about science fiction in general, mostly movies. Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars, and for the foreseeable future, we're going to be talking about Star Wars by each episode, starting today with episode 4, A New Hope. Now, the objective of this show is for me and my friend Vern, who is online with me. We are going to discuss what we liked, what we disliked, different things about the movies that stood out to us. And the point of this show is that we have very different views on certain parts of it. We agree on certain parts of it. We're not going to hide anything. It's full disclosure. And if we find things that we disagree with, it's okay. We're not trying to persuade each other of our opinions. We're simply letting our opinions be known. And then we are going to figuratively shake hands because we're not in the same room and continue to be friends afterward, no matter how much we disagree. Something that I think, that we both think, has been lost largely to the communities on social media and elsewhere on the internet, because people just don't seem to realize that their opinion is not everything. So again, today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, released in 1977, for those of you who don't know. I will let Vern start with his what he likes about it. We'll start with that, which I'm sure that with this movie, a lot of it we're going to agree about what we like and what we dislike because they're pretty common. Our next episode will be on The Empire Strikes Back, released in 1980. Okay, so Vern, go ahead. What do you
Well, I'm not
like?
shaking your filthy hand, Josh, because your opinions are different than mine, so I wouldn't want to sully myself.
Right.
How about we start with introductions?
Okay. Yes, good idea. So this is our first podcast. Well, I don't know about Vern. This is my first podcast, so I hope that you'll bear with us. I admit freely I have never done a podcast. I don't even listen to them very often. Once or twice I have. My name is Josh. I'm originally from California. I love watching movies and analyzing them, but I don't watch every movie that comes down. Just movies that I think I'll enjoy. I don't tend to watch movies if they don't really pique my interest. So there are a lot of movies that and TV shows that I just never have bothered with because they don't look like they're my type of thing. Star Wars, I've been watching since I was a child. I was 6 years old, I think, when the first. No, I must have been younger than that. 4 years old when the original Star Wars. At the time, it was just Star Wars. Now it's known as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. When that was released in 1977, I was 4 years old. And I probably watched it right about then. I barely remember it, but it's been a part of my life since then.
Josh and I have known each other for about 30 years now. We used to work at Disneyland in Anaheim together, and we used to be roommates. And then later on, we were roommates in North Hollywood, where I worked for Warner Brothers Studios. I'm a little older than he is, and we are very, very different people. So the presentation of our opinions in a podcast like this is actually exemplary of the kind of variety that you would actually get on a lot of opinions online. And so, since we've been friends for so long, we have an understanding of each other, and since we are so different, we are, inevitably going to disagree. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've always said that. Entertainment is a lot like food or music. It's really about the palate, and the palate is different for everybody. To one person, broccoli makes them break out in hives, and to another person, chocolate is disgusting. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. I personally think pineapple belongs on pizza. There's a lot of people that would vilify me and paint pictures of me with horns on my head and burn my house down for having such a blasphemous opinion. But it's a palate opinion, and when it comes to taste in entertainment, it's no different.
Yeah.
I'm a professional artist in Forks, Washington currently. I have a family of five, and I've always been a Star Wars fan, always will be a Star Wars fan, mainly because I very much appreciate mythology and I appreciate the grit and the impact and the influence that story has on humanity. And that is humanity throughout history. But right now, for the last 100 years or so, our mythologies, our campfire stories have evolved into film. And so film may be going through a great transition at this point in history, which we can talk about at some point. But as of right now, for the last 100 years, we're kind of on the trailing end of this new form of mythology, which has undeniably had an impact on people's thinking, on their hope for the future, on the way they see each other. And so that I think is one thing that Josh and I agree on is that the way that this mythology has turned us against each other is wrong. That is also an opinion. But it's something that we all need to ask ourselves, like, why, how did it come to this? And why is it that I can, look over my neighbor's fence and see him doing something that I don't agree with, that there's nothing wrong with what he's doing, but it's not something I want, something I agree with, and all of a sudden he's my enemy. And I think part of it has to do with just hiding behind our keyboards, like we talk about. So yeah, we're going to go through each movie one at a time, and try to make an episode out of each one. We're trying to be respectful of people's time and keep it underneath an hour. We're thinking somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, depending on the conversation. And we're going to start, I think, chronologically. So we're starting in the 70s.
Well, we're
And
starting
Josh,
by release date, not by
by
not by
release,
chronology of the movies,
right.
because we're doing
Right,
episode
as
four
as
first.
an experience, not as a story, as an experience. So like
Right.
our experience. So Josh is a little younger than me. So I was probably about 9, I think, maybe 8 or 9, when Star Wars first. Actually, I was 6 when Star Wars first came out, but I had no idea. But I remember by the time I was about 8 years old, I remember the first time I quote unquote saw Star Wars. My dad had gone out with some friends, and he had one of those laptop cassette recorders, one of the big heavy things with the handle from the 70s. And he brought the cassette recorder into the movie and recorded the entire audio of the movie from beginning to end, flipped the tape over when it was full, and recorded the back half. And so he brought that home, and me and my 3 little brothers, that's how we saw Star Wars. That's how we experienced Star Wars the very first time. That's how it entered into our culture. Is that it was this big phenomenon, and everybody was talking about it, and you could see like you could go to the 7-Eleven around the corner, and there were Kenner cards with little sticks of bubble gum in it, and so there were books in the malls and things, and so it was impossible to escape what this was about. All the other kids were wanting the Star Wars action figures at the time, and I remember listening to the entire movie over and over and over again, trying to imagine the voices and what they were attached to, and trying to imagine listening to the final battle around the Death Star, and only hearing the roar of the Tie Fighters or the pew pew of the lasers, and you're trying to picture in your child's mind what is going on. I have a picture on my desktop right now that is an X-wing speeding down the trench, chased by a bunch of Tie Fighters behind it. Really nice piece of art, and it's kind of what I imagine my little brain must have been experiencing as I was listening to these stories. Just sort of this homogenized Star Warsy, picture of what was going on. But it definitely inspired my imagination, and I think that the first time I actually saw Star Wars was probably into the 80s, because you got to realize at the time you couldn't just download it. There was no VHS, there was no DVD. So like
Right.
the only way you're going to get to see Star Wars is if you actually catch it on the theater, or if it comes to television. I think that's honestly the very first time I saw Star Wars, a big event. We're playing Star Wars on TV for the first time. It's going to be 3 hours long, and we're going to punctuate it with a million commercials. But that is how I experienced it the first time. And I can't actually remember if my brain was disagreeing with what I saw, because I had spent so much time imagining things and the movie wasn't exactly what I imagined. But that's how it touched me the first time. And so now we're camping around 1980 or so, before Empire comes out, and we're going to talk about the effect that it had on us and the opinions that we have about the way the story flowed.
Yeah. And something that I think we should also talk about, because you brought it up, is what a fan is. Because I've been seeing more and more on Facebook people who say a real fan would not like the sequels or something like that. And I disagree. And I'm speaking as a person who actually loves the sequels. Um, I like the sequels more than two of the prequels. Not all three of them, but two of them. And I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong or anything like that, but I say that I am a fan, and so is a person who dislikes all of the sequels. So is a person who only likes the original trilogy and doesn't like the prequels or the sequels. I'm a fan of every single thing that has come out. I even like The Acolyte, and I'm saying even because so many people love to say how much they hated it, even though it was not my favorite, but I enjoyed it. Uh, and I don't think that makes me more of a fan or less of a fan. I'm just a fan. That means that I like Star Wars. It doesn't mean I'm allowed to gatekeep Star Wars from anyone else just because they like or dislike something.
Yeah, I'm
That's my
glad
own opinion.
you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that gatekeeping because that was the first thing that was coming to my mind is that it's a really gatekeeping um, thought to separate someone from your private club because they didn't abide by the bylaws of your private club. And in your private club, the original trilogy is the central concept, and then the prequels might be, sort of a little bit of a surprise and a deviation from that, but still within the bounds, and of course still done by Lucas, and therefore, okay, we're accepting this, other tangential club into our club, and then the sequels don't go that way, and they weren't done by Lucas, and so even though they have the name Star Wars on them, your attitude is like, well, you're not part of the club. It's
Yeah.
not your club. I think that's the bottom line. It's not your club. It's the word fan comes from the term fanatic, and the definition of fanatic, I have it right in front of me right now, is a person filled with excessive and single-minded zeal, especially for an extreme religious or political cause. To a lot of people, I think Star Wars very much is religious
And
in its
political.
connotation and political, right? It's really both of those, and I don't think that's something you sort of overlay artificially on top of it. I think it's something that Lucas actually cooked into the cake.
Oh,
Um, and
definitely.
so and so when you get really religious about a movie, it is easy to vilify the heretics. And I think we mix the idea of it being an entertainment with something that is, another thing entirely when we forget that it's just an entertainment. It's just a story, but it affects us so deeply. I mean, that's the best kind of story. Is something that affects us so deeply that we think of it as like something that is part of a religion that we have to, make sure that we, protect at all costs and keep it pure. Because when the heretics come in, they start spreading false teachings, and we can't have that because that confuses the people.
And
Yeah,
we've discussed that actually. Vern and I have discussed that over the phone before of why it is and to what degree it is acceptable, why a person might do this, because I understand a person who wants to protect the thing that they love, and if they see something coming out that they feel is disrespectful to it, they want to speak out and say, well, this is not good. But at the same time, it's worth noting that just because you don't like it doesn't mean that no one else does. It certainly doesn't mean no one else should. So I've heard a lot of people talking about how much they hated the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and that was my favorite Star Wars Disney Plus show. Um, like I said, I like The Acolyte. I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, but I enjoyed it. And there are people out there who think it's absolutely against everything that Star Wars ever stood for, and I don't get that. I understand why they feel they need to protect Star Wars, and at the same time, I think it's unwarranted. But I'm not saying they're wrong because that's not really my place. I don't know if it's anyone's places, but if it is, it's certainly not mine.
Yeah, my favorite is Mandalorian. And I think probably a close second is Obi-Wan. The internet is, we all understand the internet is pretty harsh, and the internet is us. Let's
Yeah,
face it, the internet's not some big AI. It's us, and we are very harsh in our judgment of everything on the internet. And so, before I begin to tear into things about Star Wars that I don't like today, I just want to make it clear that we tend to be a lot harsher than we need to be, and it could be that trope of like the dog that's all pissed off behind the gate, and then you open up the gate and then he's licking his chops and he's all friendly, and then you close the gate and he's snarling and growling his teeth again. I mean, I would hate to think that that kind of cowardice is actually on display with with any fandom, let alone the Star Wars fandom. But that's the picture. The
That's what
picture
it
is that
seems to
we're
be.
so much nastier. Yeah, we're so much nastier when we're behind our keyboards than we are when we're in person. When we say things that we would never say around other people because, let's face it, we wouldn't want to be treated that way. So we don't, we tend not to treat each other that way. But then you get us on our keyboards and it's a whole different story.
And I
So
have
anyway,
talked to
I do
people.
want to
Sorry.
I do want to say that we're here to talk about New Hope,
Yeah,
and we should
yeah.
probably get
So
to it.
yeah, we do need to do that. I was going to say that, and then I started getting sidetracked. So
We are getting sidetracked. Everybody knows our favorite Disney show now, and we've talked about the prequels and the sequels.
and we'll get
let's
to
let's
those.
let's get to it.
If
Yeah,
there
we
is an
will.
audience for it, then I am definitely willing to do a show about each
Sure,
of the shows because I love the shows.
sure.
But for now, Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. So
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that I'm very glad that Lucas came in the middle of the story. I think that his choice of beginning in episode four was a unique and ingenious one. It gives you an impression of when you go into Star Wars, one of the things that really made it famous originally is that in an era where sci-fi was very polished and white and clean, and it was all sort of simulating like NASA and this militant whitewashed future where everything was made out of gleaming technology. Star Wars comes along and everything's filthy, everything's beat up, everything's used, and it made it feel so lived in. This is an old story. Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
yeah,
But part of the reason for that is because it started in episode four. Because you like right off the bat, you see Star Wars and you hear Williams soundtrack, and then the first thing you see is episode four, and it's
hmm
like what? Like I missed the trailer for the last episode or something. Like what? Am I coming
Well,
into the middle of the story?
don't forget that when the first movie came out, it didn't actually. Well, I'm told I have no memory of this, but I'm told that in the original release in 1977, it did not actually say Episode 4: A
That
New.
sounds like a Mandela effect to me. I don't have any proof one way or the other, but I am almost positive that it said episode four in the beginning because that was Lucas's whole thing.
Well,
I don't think that was retconned at some future point. I would definitely put that in an internet rumor category until I saw definitive proof otherwise.
yeah, I would be interested in seeing if that was true. That's what I've been told, and like I said, I have no memory of seeing it in 1977.
Well, we're
Uh,
going to look into that, and to anyone listening, we will clarify that in the next episode because I'm very curious about that. I've never heard that before, and I very much doubt it.
I also, and I know that this is something that a lot of fans would gasp, but I have actually had a lot of trouble my whole life believing that George Lucas actually had the whole thing mapped out to episode, what was it, 12 or 9? He said, and that he told that he had like this whole grand story and he didn't know that he was going to make it all in 1977, so he just put his favorite stuff in it. And I don't
Yeah,
know if I bought that. I still don't know if
yeah,
I
I buy it.
completely buy it because
I
we've
buy it.
seen so many things that changed. I mean, it's obvious that he was setting up a love interest between Luke and Leia in the first movie. And then in the second movie, oh, well, actually, maybe I'll have Han and Leia, and Luke will be like the third wheel, and maybe he might be a romantic interest because she kisses him. I'm sure that George Lucas had no idea at the time that he was going to make Luke and Leia siblings. So, and some people could say, yeah,
How are you sure of that, Josh?
I'm not sure of it. I've said
Okay,
this is something that
okay.
has always bothered me. The rumor is, or not a rumor, but something that George Lucas also said was that he had this character from Episode 6 that he loved, and he didn't know if he was going to make Episode 6 when he was doing the first movie. So he decided to move the
He
character
didn't even
up.
know. Yeah, he
Yeah,
didn't even know if
so
he
he decided to move the character up.
was
So
alive.
the character of Wicket was the character that he loved, except that it wasn't Wicket, the Ewok, it was Chewbacca. And originally his idea was that Chewbacca was going to show up in the sixth movie, or in the sixth episode, and they were going to be Wookiees. And then he loved the character so much, he
Sure.
moved him up to episode four so that people could see him. And then by the time he did Return of the Jedi, he was like, well, people have already seen Wookiees, so I'm going to make the opposite of Wookiees. So he, instead of having really tall people with long furry hair, he had
Short furry things.
short things with very short fur. And instead of Wookiee, it would be Ewok, which is Wookiee backwards or something. And I don't know. Some of that, and I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm saying that I have a little trouble believing it. But then again, I'm not George Lucas, and I'm willing to say, you know, I mean, there's another. It's one of
Well,
those
I
things.
think that there's grace in the idea that he had this whole giant, chain of events laid out in his head, and he picked where he wanted to come into the story. And after that, it naturally evolved over time into what we now know. I don't think there's anything, extraordinary about the idea that he couldn't possibly have had every single detail lined out in his head, and nobody ever claimed that he did, but that he had an overall sort of zoomed out chain of events in mind, and the proof is in the writing. Josh, there's extant yellow page synopsises that he wrote before Star Wars was even produced,
Yeah,
that prove that he had a lot of things in mind that were not in episode four.
right. And
And
I'm
none
not
of it
saying that
was
it wasn't.
exactly what we remember.
Yeah, I'm not saying that none of it was true or anything. I just had trouble, especially when I was younger. I had a lot of trouble believing it because so many things turned out different, or looked like it was changed midway to me. And I'm not in a position to say that one thing is true or not true. I'm just saying that these were my feelings that I had for a long time that I really didn't know if he was being honest or if it just sounded good for him to say I had the whole story planned out to episode 12 and I was going to do this, but I didn't know if I was going to make a movie. I have no idea. Um,
We make heroes out of all of our, all the people that we look up to, all the people that we feel, indebted to for what their contribution to humanity, if you will. I think Einstein was not nearly the genius that we remember him as. I think he figured out some extraordinary things about the universe, which many of which we still don't have the technology to actually prove. Many of which is the cornerstone of the chalkboard physics that we do, which remains to be seen exactly how practical it is in application to our conquest of the universe, for instance. I think that there are stories about Einstein leaving his house without his pants on because he was so absent-minded that he needed his wife to like wash his clothes and remember things for him and do his dishes for him. And to an extent, I believe it, because our geniuses are always broken in some way. It's impossible to, Elon Musk. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of weirdness going on in that life because you can't achieve the level of mentality that it takes to accomplish the things that you're famous for without something else suffering in your life.
I suppose we
For
should.
instance, if you're a very driven person, 10 to 1, you haven't watched a lot of Saturday morning cartoons because you've been driven your whole life and now you're spectacular. You have a black belt and you're a genius at this and that. But you know what? If somebody tried to like start a conversation with you about Transformers, you may not have any idea what they're talking about. Yeah, that's not necessarily a deficiency. I'm just saying that you're making a sacrifice for one thing to another. And Lucas, I think, because we've taken Star Wars and made it into a religion, we tend to think of the Buddha-like figure that gave us Star Wars as this, untouchable creative genius. And I think partially that's true. But I certainly think that it's been easy for us over the years to exaggerate that. And many of the urban legends that we have about George Lucas could be, at the very least, exaggerated and possibly even just rumor because we've really wanted Lucas to be a genius.
Yeah. Something that we should mention real quick, just because you brought up Elon Musk, is that we're Probably going to avoid politics in general, although politics are going to come up invariably because Star Wars is political and always has been from day one. Um,
And religious.
and religious, as we said before. So, but I don't want you to think that we are endorsing a political side or candidate or anything, because we're really not about that. Um, I just in case anyone
We're just
wanted
talking
to,
about Star Wars.
yeah, in case anyone wanted to mention that Elon Musk has been mentioned in this show now, that doesn't mean that, we're for him or against him or anything. It's just that we mentioned him. Um, so one of the things, so I suppose the easiest thing to say that I love about A New Hope is that it's the classic hero's journey. You can't get more basic than that, and that's a good thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's basic in that like there's no storytelling involved. It's the hero's journey. It's been seen. You've seen it in Excalibur. You saw it in Dragon Slayer at the time. You saw it in. I mean, Dragon Slayer hadn't come out yet, but it's the same story. Krull is a movie that Vern and I loved back when it was released, and that's another hero's journey. It's the same story. You've got
Kroll?
Krull,
Oh,
Krull.
Kroll.
Yes,
Kroll. Yes, yes,
same
yes, yes.
story.
Hero's Journey.
It's
Yep.
exactly
Yep.
the same story, and it's got the Star Wars connection because Liam Neeson is, yeah, Qui-Gon is in it.
Yeah,
Um,
I love Kroll. I love Kroll.
yeah, Krull was a great movie, but it is Star Wars.
It's also an interesting, similar mix of fantasy and sci-fi as well. It's kind
Hmm.
of hard to tell exactly if it's a sci-fi or a fantasy.
Yeah,
Because this bad guy comes from a spaceship and lands on a planet. It's not Earth; it's some other planet, and he's got these minions that run around shooting lasers at people.
hmm,
And yet, it's really all about like magic weapons and riding around on horseback, and it's
yeah.
it's a great fusion of fantasy and sci-fi, just like
Yeah,
Star Wars.
but it is the same story in that it is a hero's journey. So you've got
Yes.
your relatable main character who is generally a hero, a young boy who aspires to be something greater than he is, but he's usually a farm boy or something subtle.
Well, in this case, he's a prince, but okay.
Right, but in Star Wars, he's a farm boy.
In Star Wars, he's
There's
a farm
the,
boy, yeah.
the right. There's the wise
Even though
old
they're dirt farmers.
there's the wise old sage who will take the young man on his journey and give him a quest, and usually dies along the way. There's the damsel in distress. There's the rogue who ends up helping him. It's the hero's journey. It's young.
Yeah, and Lucas directly drew from that mythology too. What is it, Joseph Campbell?
Right.
Joseph Campbell is the one that wrote the book
That
on
hero's
mythology
journey.
and
Yes.
drive and described the hero's journey, and it was deeply impactful on Lucas as he was putting the story together. So,
And
and
Young,
and that's a
he
myth
did the
that's
hero.
a mythological root that goes all the way back to ancient times. There's many stories that follow that same process. One of the reasons why the old sage has to be removed from the story at some point in the middle is because we want our farm boy, who is the eyes through which we're sort of experiencing the story. We need him to take what he's learned and stand on his own, and that happens immediately when Obi-Wan is killed by Vader, and then you hear his voice. He's still present, but at this point, Luke is on his own, and he's terrified and he's scared, and immediately he gets this much more adult, responsible face on him. He gets angry and he starts blowing away stormtroopers on the Death Star, and then he hears the voice of Obi-Wan and he obeys it right away and he runs into the Falcon. And at that point, he's on his own. And what's the first thing we see him do? Take on a gun in a cockpit and blow away a bunch of TIE fighters in space.
Mhm.
So, and that's a instant transformation of his character. Even the scenes before that, when he's whining through the halls with Leia trying to be in charge and Han trying to be in charge. He's just sort of like a guest there. He's just sort of tagging along with them. He
Mhm.
shows up and tries to rescue the princess, and the first thing she says is, "Aren't you short? Aren't you a bit short?"
Yeah.
So like we have this black and white moment where before Obi-Wan dies, Luke is just sort of a kid. And then the moment after Obi-Wan dies, there's a rapid transformation of him and his responsibility to be able to respond to the environment and take courage and stand on his own.
It's
And that's what Joseph Campbell wrote about, is the idea that once the sage is gone, then you're on your own.
Yeah, and Carl Jung, A Hero of a Thousand Faces. I mean, we could talk about Luke, and we will be talking about Luke quite a bit in the
We have
coming
to.
episodes because in this movie particularly, I can agree with the majority of people, I think, uh, in general, in saying that Luke is he's a BDH, which for those of you who don't know, that means big damn hero. Uh, Luke is definitely the
Is
BDH
that from
in
Firefly? Where'd that
from
come from?
yeah, from Firefly.
From Firefly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I ever say BDH, that's what I mean. Big damn hero, sir. And Luke, ain't he just? In the first in A New Hope, he is a hero, and I'm not going to argue that. In the later movies, I don't think so, and that's part of why I'm one of those people who love the sequels and don't think they destroyed Luke's character because I felt like they were perfectly in line. And I know we're going to have lots of words about that in the future, but for now, since we're just talking about A New Hope, I can agree with everyone that in A New Hope, Luke is definitely the hero, and he is shown to be that hero over and over again by Lucas throughout the whole movie. It is following the hero's journey with him having that coming of age moment. You can see it where he's sitting in the Falcon after Obi-Wan has died, sitting there and saying, "I can't believe he's gone." And Leia, the damsel in distress, is comforting him, and then except she's not in distress anymore because they've already rescued her. And you can already see when he gets up, Han tells him that there's TIE fighters on the way, and so he gets up to go to the turret, and you can already see he's a little bit more confident by that time. He's not. It's not something that's easily visible, but he's not slouched as much. He's kind of like he
Yeah.
ran to the turrets, and you still hear the excitement when he shoots the TIE fighter. He's like, "I got him!" And it's still kind of that boyish, I can't believe I did it. But at the same time, as Han said, don't get cocky. He had a little bit of cockiness there, or maybe that was just Han being insecure and saying, don't get cocky. That's my job. You didn't do that good because I'm the one who's supposed to shoot them down. You're supposed to be the kid who can't do anything.
Well, I don't get the impression that before that scene, Luke had ever, stood in a space-based vessel and blasted anything out of the sky with any kind of cannon.
Oh, definitely.
So it was definitely a first experience for him, and I think that the force is kicking in. Obviously, I like I said before, an early stage of confidence is kicking in because Obi-Wan's gone. There's no time to mourn right now, but I'm on my own. I
Hmm.
can't ask Obi-Wan to get in that cockpit because he's magic and he'll hit everything.
Yeah.
So now I'm on my own. I got to do it on my own.
Yeah.
But there's also this naivete, this childish naivete, because like, hey, I used to, bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home,
Exactly.
but I've never been in space firing a quad cannon at TIE fighters before.
Hmm.
And he's got to also feel the thrill of, because he said earlier, I'd love to join the rebellion, but I can't. Well,
Exactly.
at this point, he's sitting in the cockpit. He's blowing away Imperial TIE fighters, Imperial attack craft. Every single time he explodes one, there's an Imperial inside that is atomized. He's got to feel for the very first time, I am now part of the rebellion,
Yeah, I am
even
making a
though
difference. I just
I would never be part of the rebellion with Obi-Wan because he's a Jedi. I would never be part of the rebellion with Han because he doesn't give a crap. But I'm here with the princess.
and he wouldn't be a
I
Jedi
just
with Uncle
busted her
Owen.
out of and I just busted her out of Imperial prison, and now I'm killing Imperials in Imperial attack fighters. That giddiness in him, I think, is partially revealed because he realizes that I'm actually a part of the rebellion for the first time,
Yeah,
and we're supposed to see that world through his eyes. That's one thing about a main character in a story is that a lot of people don't realize that when you watch the events unfold around the main character, you are supposed to see those events through their eyes. So that becomes the filter through which we experience the story. If we were to have the story surrounding Princess Leia, we started on the Corellian Corvette, and there's Princess Leia. What if the story never went to Luke? What if Luke was a background character and we followed Leia instead, and we followed her journey to the Death Star, and we watched her get tortured, and it was all about Leia, and then all of a sudden the door opens up and there's a stormtrooper standing there. We don't know who he is. Doesn't matter. He takes his head off. He introduces himself as Luke. Oh, okay. Well, now we have a new character. That's not the main character. We're seeing the entire thing unfold through the eyes of a young royal who is been accused of treason and is being imprisoned. All of a sudden your entire vision of Star Wars changes because the main character changes, and that is, I'm only saying that to reveal the obviousness that when we have a main character in a story, we are meant to see the story through that character's eyes. And that scene in space on the Falcon is a perfect example of so many things that we're supposed to understand about the story and about the characters because we're experiencing it through Luke's performance.
So then that actually brings up, what don't you like about the original movie? Because we're talking about how much we love it and how much we agree that we love it.
Hmm.
We're talking about
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that
I
we agree about. So I'm curious what you don't like about it, because there's a few things about it that I have major problems with. Not enough for me to say, oh, I hate this movie. Obviously, I love it, but there are things that bother me about it. So I thought I'd let you start.
think I'm going to have you start on that one because I don't mean to be exaggerative or inaccurate in my opinion, and I'm not trying to pay lip service to anything. I just honestly don't think I have a single problem with episode 4. I think that maybe there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but it is such an undeniable American classic. There's just literally nothing negative that I can say about the movie at all. I've probably seen that movie 40, 50 times, and I've seen it in the theater multiple times because I've been fortunate enough to be able to see re-screenings and things like that. I
Mhm.
went to the what was it, the 10th anniversary Star Wars convention. I think it was in Pasadena or Los Angeles, and they had screening. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They screened all three trilogy movies, and they had a big gala room, all the seats laid out, giant screen, surround sound, turn the lights off. It was great. It was like experiencing those movies for the first time, especially A New Hope. I was incredibly thankful to be able to see the New Hope, A New Hope in a theater environment with six, 700 minimum, six, 700 crazed fans, because it was like going there for the gala opening night. And so anyway, I've experienced this movie in every way possible,
Mhm.
including listening to the audio recording many times before I actually saw it for the first time. And I cannot think of a performance or a snafu in John Williams' amazing and memorable soundtrack. Or obviously they're limited by the special effects at the time. I am not going to comment on how Lucas should have used better effects.
Oh no, definitely
It
not.
was just absolutely ingenious in every way, and I'm really curious to find out what your uh, beefs are with it, because that might actually entice some of the disagreements that we're fishing for. Because I don't want to be overly agreeable, but I just really don't have any problem with that original movie.
Actually, now that I think of it, I said that there were multiple things I don't like, but I actually realized what I was thinking of was something for a later movie. I happen to be semi, at least, a believer of the what has been called the Kurtz theory, which
Hmm.
for those of you who don't know, Gary Kurtz was the executive producer, I believe, on the first two movies. And Lucas was brand new. He it wasn't his first movie, but he was young. He didn't have the clout that he had after Star Wars. So Gary Kurtz was able to say no to Lucas. And as they say, conflict breeds exception.
Inspiration, first of all.
His what? Oh yes, that was the
It
word.
breeds inspiration.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I think Star Wars Episode 4 has the best opening of all of the movies after the opening crawl when you see the Star Destroyer following the Corvette. I think that's hands down one of the best openings
One
in
of a
cinematic
thousand things that
history.
are
Um,
absolutely classic.
so and that's going to come up later when we get to Return of the Jedi, where Gary Kurtz was no longer. I suspect that what happened was Gary Kurtz said no, and George Lucas said, okay, you're fired. I don't know if that's exactly how it happened. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that, and I probably should read about that. But I feel like after Gary Kurtz left, things went downhill. But that's an argument for two episodes from now. As far as A New Hope, the only thing that I didn't love about it, and this is less of a complaint now at my age, but when I was a child, I found the scenes on Tatooine to be kind of boring, slow, because there was very little action until they're escaping Tatooine. There was very little action. There was a lot of talking. And to a kid, when I was, 10, 11, 12, I was just like, I want to see lasers. I want to see light swords. I want to see someone doing something, and all I see is a bunch of people talking. Um, and it felt at the time interminable. Now I watch the movie, and it feels like they're on Tatooine for 5 minutes, and then they're already on the way to the Death Star. But that could just be because I'm old and I know what's coming up, and I know how important all of the buildup is on Tatooine. So I'm not complaining that it was boring to everyone, but to my child self, that was the part of the movie that I wanted to skip, and that's my only like complaint at all. I don't even know if it's a complaint. I feel bad saying it even because at my
Yeah,
age now, I
it's
love it.
valid.
Yeah, but as a kid, it
It's
really.
valid. Yeah, I can see how you kind of like it starts out. It's a beef that I have about many movies today. Is like it's like they automatically assume that we're all children, that we're all 3 years old, and if they don't start with fireworks, then we're all gonna like fall asleep immediately. I don't understand that. I think probably a great way to summarize that is this ridiculous trend that's been on YouTube for years now, and I think it's finally, thankfully, starting to die, and that's the trailer before the trailer. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, they're still
Oh my
doing
God,
it.
this
The
drives
teaser
me
for the
nuts.
teaser. The
This
they
drives me nuts.
they did
You
it
take
today,
so a
2 days ago.
trailer. So anybody who understands how trailers work, they are supposed to be a journey just like the movie. They start out slow, they build up, they introduce some main characters, they have a few teasers, then things start to blow up, and then at the end there's a big reveal. And hopefully none of it really gives away the movie, but it's supposed to be an encapsulation of the movie in a minute and a half that makes you want to go see the movie. What kind of movie would it be if we took the best 15 seconds of the movie and played it just before the movie? Welcome to the theater. You're about to see
Yes.
something awesome. Let's show you the ending first. It is so ridiculous how like the people who make trailers get paid a lot of money to edit these trailers. And how this fucking trend started is beyond my comprehension. You go on YouTube, you want to see a trailer, and it's like explosion, explosion, somebody getting punched, and then the trailer starts now. And it's like, do you really think that we're going to fall asleep in the first 5 seconds of the trailer if you don't have fireworks? We are not infants. So when Star Wars comes out, big explosions, brilliant opening. The reality is, it doesn't matter if you're 3 or 300, you're going to be on the edge of your seat right off the bat, especially in 1978 when nobody had ever seen anything like this before. But after the attack on the Corvette, when the escape pod is spiraling down toward the planet, it's like at that point you're on the edge of your seat, you're holding your breath, you've seen something you've never seen before, and then Luke, it's like you take a breath. You take a breath. I think that's why the Tatooine scenes are ingenious, is because especially you got to think about, this isn't made for 2024. This is made for 1977.
Mhm.
And so at that point, nobody had ever seen anything as intensely exciting as that attack between the destroyer and the Corvette. And so it's so calm when you see Luke come out, and the music is calm, and even the landscape is not complicated. There isn't a big city in the background. There isn't a whole bunch of aliens. There isn't a bunch of activity, things flying in the sky. There isn't even a forest or anything visually complicated.
Nope,
It's
it's
like
sand.
that was a crazy thing that we just saw, and okay, I understand sand, okay, and I understand kids and their ants, okay, and it gives you a chance to think and process, and I think that kind of pacing is something that that Lucas was a genius at, and something that we don't really have very many geniuses anymore that understand that you have to have a calm moment and build up to the fireworks, and then the fireworks make you all tired and stressed, and it's like a roller coaster. It's like you anticipate click 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 click, you're building up to the top, and then at the top you don't immediately get slammed down. You go through a couple of banks and maybe a loop, and it's like there's a moment to think, and then there's a moment to scream, and then there's a moment for your belly to fall out, and there's a moment for the belly to come back up, and so where is the thrill in the roller coaster? It's not at the peaks, it's at the troughs.
Hmm.
It's when you're white knuckle on the car and you're diving down, and it's like if the track suddenly disappears, everybody's impacting the ground and you're dead. That's stressful, that's fear. We love the sense of fear when it doesn't kill us, because when you come out of that trough, and I'm making a direct correlation with storytelling, when you come out of that trough, your heart jumps into your belly and your belly falls out the bottom of you, and then you soar up to the top, and you realize, even if we're not thinking about it, you realize in that moment, I survived. I didn't die. Every bone in my body told me I was going to die, and I didn't die. Not only that, but all my guts got rearranged, and now they're kind of, as soon as you get to the top of that next bank on the roller coaster, all your guts are right back where they're supposed to be, and it's like, I'm gonna be okay. And then
Hmm.
you laugh because it was like getting scared on Halloween. It's like boo, and then you scream, and then it's like, oh haha, that was funny. I'm not dead now. The same thing happens in a story. It's called pacing.
Yeah.
And so Tatooine to me is pacing for an audience that, let's face it, Josh, we're talking about an audience that was like strung out on chips and Little House on the Prairie. These were not people ready for the kind of, amazing opening that Star Wars was, and the Tatooine scenes were absolutely essential to give everybody a breath.
Oh,
And that being said, I will actually say there is one thing I guess I could say I have a problem with the original story, and it's also concerning Tatooine. I have a problem with, since long after the movie came out, we finally, when the internet came along, we finally got a chance to see a lot of behind the scenes things and things that ended up on the editing room floor.
mm,
And I have seen some very cool scenes
the
that were
Tashi Station.
filmed. Yes, exactly. And things like that that were filmed that really do, like later on, Wedge, or not Wedge,
Biggs.
Biggs.
Yeah.
Biggs comes out at the end at Davin 4. And it's like,
Yavin.
Yavin, sorry. And Luke is like, "Oh, it's my friend," and it's like,
Yeah, and he
I
mentioned him
if you
once.
were
He mentioned
if you were
him.
paying
Yeah.
attention, you remembered him mention him one time, but other than that, it's like, I don't know who this guy is. I guess I'm happy
Yeah.
for you, Luke. Like, but like if we were to see their relationship, and the fact that in the course of that relationship, if you watch the cut scene, Luke actually like talks about how he'd love to join the rebellion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I've
there's a
seen the
lot
scene.
that ended up on the showroom on the editing room floor there, and I think that out of sympathy for Lucas, the reality is he was also trying to appeal to a generation that had never seen a movie longer than, well, actually that's not true. If you go, the
No.
Ten
No.
Commandments is like 3.5 hours long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but he was trying to satisfy the general audience by making sure that it didn't run too long. And so as an editor myself, I'm an editor. I have a background in Hollywood, and I know that one of the principles that an editor understands very well is something called killing your babies. And it's like, if you're a filmmaker, there are many things throughout the production of the movie that it's like, it was just the right time. He did exactly what I wanted him to. The lighting was just beautiful. This is a beautiful shot. I gotta have this. And then on the editing room floor, you're like,
Yeah.
in
I
order
have
to
to get rid of it.
establish the
Yeah.
pacing, I have to lose this, because as much as I personally love it, it's not serving the story. And
Yeah.
so they call that killing your babies. And I'm sure that's what Lucas did. But if I had a beef about anything in episode 4, it would be the parts that didn't make episode 4.
That's true. And I can actually share with you when I was younger. I don't remember when, but I was a kid, definitely, still in elementary school, and I read the novelization of the movie, and they actually did have the scenes with Biggs, and his last name was Darklightner, I believe, and
Oh yeah,
I remember it was something that stuck with me. I haven't read it since then, but I know that at some point Biggs said. Or they had a saying that Biggs and Luke used to say, "We're a couple of shooting stars, Luke. They're never going to stop us now," something like that. And then
oh yeah,
in the novel, when Biggs was destroyed, that was what Luke thought. Like, yep, Biggs, we're just a couple of shooting stars. And, you can see that, like, John Williams' music does get that somber tone when Biggs dies. And Luke has that
yeah,
look because it is his friend. But unless you were paying close attention and know that they mentioned Biggs at the beginning of the movie, uh, you would have no idea that he ever knew him. And
yeah,
even with the special editions,
yeah.
they
The
do have,
emotion that he's feeling, you can't feel. You
yeah.
can't feel that emotion that he's feeling because you're disconnected from the character.
And with the special
Yeah,
edition, they did put in that one additional scene right before the Battle of Yavin where you see
yeah,
Luke meeting
yeah.
Biggs and talking to Red One, whatever
But it
his name
wasn't
was.
enough.
Um, yeah,
In my humble opinion, it wasn't enough. Like I wanted
yeah,
that scene in the beginning in Tatooine, but I think that Lucas was also trying to ditch Tatooine as quick as possible for the same reason that you just complained about it. It's
yeah.
just like he wants to get back to the fireworks,
And not for
and the
nothing,
fireworks start when the Falcon takes off.
yeah, and not for nothing, like I said, I do feel bad saying that because my 51-year-old
I get
self
it.
absolutely loves the entire movie, and I don't get bored watching Tatooine now. But when I was 10, it
Sure,
felt like it was half the movie and nothing was happening. And that it makes sense
spoiled
because a
brat. At least
10-year-old.
you watched the movie when you were 10.
Well, true. But that, yeah. So, and then the only other
So yeah,
thing,
the novelization is always. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the New Hope was written by Alan Dean Foster. He also did the novelization for Alien. Both of those novelizations I read, and he's obviously a very prolific and well-known science fiction writer and very good at it.
mhm,
And I think that often I read read Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park before you and I
mhm.
actually went to go see it in the movie theater in 1993, and that's a different kind of thing than a novelization. But the thing about a book over a movie is that you get to spend a lot more time exploring the thoughts and the flashbacks and the memories of the characters, which give you a much more three-dimensional idea than what you get on the screen.
But it also
And so
depends on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, like, I remember reading that one, that original book by Alan Dean Foster. I had the same exact impression. In fact, I would say, pound for pound, like, Alien was probably the scariest movie I ever watched because it was the first time I ever saw anything commercial free and unedited on HBO, and I was like 11 years old,
Hmm.
and it was just way outside of anything I'd ever seen before, and it made a permanent indelible mark on my mind. But when I read the book, it was even scarier because
Mm.
there's so much, like, you can't get into the crunching and the grinding and the pain that the character's going through just simply by watching the alien sort of eat them off screen. In the book, all that gets, detail gets explained in detail, and you kind of get a chance to experience it inside the mind of the person who's experiencing it.
Yeah,
And I had that same impression with Star Wars. If you've never read the novelization of Star Wars and you love the movie, you should take the time
yeah.
to read it because it gives you so much more.
There are a lot of movie tie-ins, which I feel like are a little bit different because movie tie-ins come out after the movie, and a lot of times they're writers who are writing about what they saw on the screen. But when you see a novelization, and I don't know if this is an official thing, and I don't know how often it happens, but I know that with Star Wars and similar movies to that, the author was able to talk to the original writer so that he had insight into these characters that didn't come through in the movie, which is why when you read the novelization of Star Wars, you get those scenes on Tatooine that were not in the movie. But if you read a movie tie-in of, well, I remember reading a movie tie-in of Superman 2, and there was nothing in there that didn't
Oh yeah.
happen in the movie because it
Yeah,
was
yeah, that's
basically
a
a
boring novelization.
yeah, a guy went into, I don't know who wrote it, but a guy went in, watched Superman 2, took some notes, and then wrote down what happened. And
Right.
that was a movie tie-in. It wasn't really a
Yeah.
novelization of the movie. It was just,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
don't
and
know
and
if
Star Wars and New Hope was not written by some, nobody that just, was hired to like novelize the movie.
right.
Alan Dean Foster is like hiring Ray Bradbury or, Isaac Asimov,
Yeah.
so you are going to get deep into the characters and you are going to get a different experience from the book that is not in the movie.
And that's not to impugn whoever it is that wrote Superman 2. I'm not saying he's a hack. I'm just saying that the movie or that movie tie-in book didn't go in depth the way the Star Wars novelization did. And I don't I also want to apologize if I'm using the term movie tie-in and novelization incorrectly. But that's always been kind of how I saw it because when I read a book like Star Wars, it actually said on the spine a novelization of the movie, whereas Superman 2, it actually said on the spine movie tie-in. So I've always kind of associated the two that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'll
What
because there's a lull in our conversation, I want to throw out real quick for our listeners. I don't know how the sound quality is in the show because, like I said, this is our very first podcast. We have
Working on it.
we're yeah we have pretty good equipment, I think, but we're limited by first of all, uh, Vern lives out in a beautiful area in Washington that has no internet. No, it has internet, but not like it's not
It's
strong.
awful.
Well, you can say it's awful. I was just going to say it's not as good.
Yeah, I'll honestly say it's awful.
I live in a big area, in a very populated area, and I have top of the line internet in a place that requires top of the line internet. So my connection is probably better than his, so there might be some hiccups in the sound. I'm trying to work on it, and I'm still kind of learning the editing software. But just in case, please, like, forgive us if there are hiccups in the sound quality.
And enough of the apologies.
Yeah, sorry
Have you
about that.
seen have you seen have you seen the YouTube video that somebody did? I can't recall who the author was, but it is a editing of the story of the Clone Wars that Obi-Wan tells Luke in his, hut in Tatooine from the first movie. And while he's talking about
Oh yeah, it
how
splices in scenes
your
from the
father and
Clone
I were
Wars.
good friends, and yeah, and it splices in all
Yeah,
the scenes from the prequels, and mixes it so expertly that it's deeply emotional because like you can see the response on Alec Guinness's face. And he's imagining what Lucas has explained to him, but much like everyone else on the production of episode 4, Lucas is this crazy nerdy guy that has this ridiculous vision. And then this film crew shows up on a shoestring budget and they've got this trash can that they pull out of the back of a car that's rolling around on wheels, and they've got this weird chick with the white robe with these buns on the side of her head, and they got this giant walking carpet, and this other guy that I mean, it's just this hodgepodge of characters, and then they're creating this weird architecture that nobody's ever seen. That I've heard it 100 times. How people that were tangentially attached to the production are like, we had no idea
yeah,
what. Even the actors, I've heard the actors say, I had no idea what we were doing. I just
yeah,
did what I
yeah.
was told.
But Alec
And so
Guinness
so
was famous for saying like it's rubbish.
well, not only that, but he was also the consummate professional.
Hmm.
Like it may be rubbish, but this is our job. This is our craft. This
Exactly.
crazy guy is asking us to do these things, so we're going to do them to the best of our ability. He kept everybody on task. Yes, this is ridiculous. Yes, it's probably going to crash and burn. Yes, it's a flop. Yes, it's stupid. But we are here to be professionals, so let's be professionals. And I think that honestly, I think that that faith and that trust and that professionality is one of the reasons why Star Wars turned out the way it did. And when Alec is sitting there in the hut trying to explain to Luke, his friend and the Clone Wars, there's emotion on his face that doesn't really ring until you see this YouTube cut where you're flashing back to what happens. And what really amazes me, it just in relation to like what you said before, which is a valid argument about whether Lucas had all this figured out ahead of time. Like it's really amazing to me how you listen to what Obi-Wan says and then you see the flashback and it's like you're crossing a bridge of over 20 years of time. I mean, really nearly 30 years of time. And no, well, no, it's
No, it's
just over
20
20
years.
years of time.
20 years.
Right, 20 years of time, right? So a whole generation has gone by between this filming with Alec Guinness and then this filming with
Ewan.
with the new cast.
Yeah.
And and when Obi-Wan talks about what happened, there is a direct correlation that is pulled up from those scenes, and the look on his face is like, I'm trying to explain to this kid, but I kind of wish I hadn't even brought up the subject because I haven't thought about this in over a decade, and it sucks. These memories suck.
Yeah.
And it's such a testament to Alec Guinness's acting ability, but also I think, and this is probably going to come out as we begin to discuss the prequels, I think it's a testament to Lucas's genius because you're taking these two scenes from two different moments in time, in real time, not just in Star Wars time, and they are meshing together perfectly. It takes a fan obviously to selectively decide what scenes are going to be best here and how to best emotionally carry them across, and then laying the right music over it. But I felt that that video is like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 minutes long, and I thought it was intensely emotional. It was an
Yeah.
incredibly emotional thing to see that scene, which I'd already seen, dozens of times before, and see it in a completely different way by meshing those things together. I really wish I remembered the name of that
I
YouTube
think you
video.
sent
Fans
it
out
to
there
me.
probably know. Fans out there know exactly what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
if I had the name of it, I could actually recommend it to you because then you could
Well, I think
immediately
you
go and
sent it to
watch it.
me, and I know I've seen it. So I think you sent
Yeah.
it to me a year ago or two, but I don't know when. But I'll definitely look for it and send it to you if I find it, because I know that I saw it.
Well, you can post it to your
Yeah,
group on Facebook
yeah,
because
I'll put it here. I'll link it once I find it. I'll link it
that's a
on
good
this.
idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. I just
Um,
can't remember what it's called.
yeah, but I'll put it there. Um, what else was I? I guess that's it for now. We're kind of coming up on an hour. This is a bit of a longer show than I suspect it'll normally be, but
Well, it had
that's because
introductions.
we had to introduce it, and we also don't know exactly how we're going to go about it. I think that's it, really. Is there anything? Like I said, if you want to leave comments, you're welcome to. You can agree with us, you can disagree with us. I would ask everyone to be respectful. I would like to think that people can be, even if you disagree with us. Like the whole point is that the whole point of our show is to show that you can disagree with someone without it being a federal offense. And
Yeah, this
if you,
movie is kind of milk toast in the Star Wars saga as far as like, homogenization of the fandom, but as we move on to Empire, we're going to begin to disagree, and that is where we're hopefully going to demonstrate the civility that we hope that fans are capable of. The
yeah,
video I was looking for is called Before the Dark Times.
ah,
It's made by Mr. Raz NZ, and it's been liked over 500,000 times. So definitely worth checking out. It's about 7 years old and it runs about 4 minutes long. It's called Before the Dark Times.
yeah.
Excellent.
And I'll post the link to that too.
Okay.
And yeah, no, the only other thing I was going to mention, and I didn't get a chance, and so I won't really talk about it much, but I was going to talk about John Williams' score because it's so phenomenal. And the one thing that makes this movie stand out from the others is that it's the singular. Uh, it's the one movie that doesn't have any of the later scores because it came out before them. It's the only movie that doesn't have a single instance of the Imperial March, um, which is probably the most recognized, well, maybe the second most recognizable theme of Star Wars is the Imperial March, and that didn't get composed until The Empire Strikes Back. So I was going to mention that, but I didn't have time, so we're going to
Well,
leave
John
that.
Williams does all 9 movies, so I'm
Yes,
sure that that particular, facet of the topic is going to come up probably starting next episode. We'll just
yeah.
put a pin in it for now.
Someone did mention though, like how would you like it if they went back and rescored A New Hope with more of the motifs that John Williams wrote for the later movies, including the Imperial March, because they have an Imperial March in A New Hope, but it isn't the Imperial March. It's that I don't know if it had a name, but the dun 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 da da da. That was that was the Imperial theme before the Imperial March was written. So
Yeah, but the movie that we're discussing is not primarily about the Empire, whereas the second movie, Episode 5, is primarily about the Empire, and so it was appropriate to give them a sound when the time
oh yeah,
was
yeah,
right,
yeah.
and
And I
and
have
so
no
it just
problem with
worked
that.
out that way.
Yeah. But I do find this movie fascinating to watch now through the lens of someone that has seen all of the movies because that Imperial March is so ingrained in me that when I think of Star Wars, I think of that march along with, the other motifs that I love because I love the Force theme. I love the Rebel fanfare, which is the main Star Wars theme. But I also love the Imperial March, and this is the one movie where I get to it and I'm like, there's no Imperial March. And that's a bit jarring, even though I completely understand it. And I am curious what most people would think. Would they want to see A New Hope rescored with all of the motifs from the later movies put in, or at least the ones that were appropriate? I don't know that they would ever do that. I don't know if it's something that's ever been bandied about, but I'm curious. Um,
I don't know if anybody will be able to. Williams is a tough act to follow. You're talking about somebody who's,
true.
trained classically, Boston Pops, London Philharmonic. It seems like everything nowadays is done by Michael Giacchino. And
Mhm.
I don't want to take any credit away from him, but it's lacking the inspiration, in my opinion, of like the James Horners and the Alan Silvestris and even the Danny Elfmans and the John Williams of the last 30 years.
There are a
And
couple of
I also really don't like the idea that everything is so homogenized. Like seriously, every single time I see a new movie, it's done by the same guy. Like this guy must be doing nothing but composing 24/7 so that he can crank out 5 movies a month that has his soundtracks in them.
yeah.
And none of them are very they're not memorable tunes. They're beautiful background noise, but none of them are memorable tunes. And
There are
so
a
anyway,
couple.
my point is
Yeah, there are
my
a
point
couple of
is he's a
composers
tough
that I
act to follow,
like,
Josh.
but yeah, oh, definitely. There are a
He's
couple
a
of
tough act to
composers
follow.
that are currently working right now that I like a lot. Um, Bear McCreary is excellent, and I forget who. Well, it doesn't matter. There's a few that I like, but no one
That's
is John
another topic.
Williams. Yeah,
That's
John Williams
another
is
topic. But
to
like
me the
when it
top
comes to
of the.
rescoring Star Wars, that would be my number one problem. Is just that you're talking about Williams, man.
What if
You want to?
Williams did it though? I mean, I know
Oh,
he's
that's totally
retired,
different.
but
That's totally different.
yeah.
That's totally
Even
different.
if it was someone else who was mixing it, but if he was using John Williams' score and just remixing it,
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's really scary is if we get to a point very soon where AI can actually like study all of John Williams' work and then actually mimic, what he would do if you were to ask him to compose this or that. That's probably not that far away.
There's a lot of people who worked on Star Wars over the years that I would love to meet. John Williams is probably near the top of the list. Um,
Sure. Sure.
but not just for Star Wars. I loved almost everything that John Williams has done
An unparalleled modern genius that
in
has given us just like 2 generations of memorable themes. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that
three
the work of
generations.
John Williams is akin to modern day classical music. Like we don't listen to Mozart and Beethoven the way they did 100 years ago,
Yeah.
but we all listen to these, works that are accompaniments to our modern mythology, just
Oh,
classical music made for us.
I think
Yeah.
I lost you there for a second. I don't know if
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Uh,
Sorry.
it's
I want
it's
to make
that
my point.
it's
If
that
if you didn't
wonderful
hear what I
internet.
said,
Yeah.
if you didn't hear what I said, I want to make my point. The point is that we are listening to modern day classical music, whether we realize it, whether we like it or not. We don't listen to Mozart and Beethoven like we used to, but that type of music is still very much in the public eye. It just takes the form of accompanying these modern mythologies that we love so much.
I
We're
have
still listening to Beethoven and Mozart. We just call them, James Horner and John Williams.
I have often said, and at the risk of, angering some people, I personally think that John Williams is a greater composer than any of those older the classics. Mozart and Beethoven. They're good. I like their, but
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that I would rather listen to John Williams any day
Well, of
because
course you would. Of
and
course you would.
and so for at least in my opinion,
But
I think
I
he's
think
greater
a
than
lot
them.
of I think a lot of classical music fans would disagree with you, and I'll
Of
bet
course.
you anything John Williams would be one of them.
Oh, I'm sure he would. But that's my
But
own.
you still get your opinion.
Yeah, that is my opinion. Also, on top of that, I was going to, what was I going to say? Oh, I have heard people say that John Williams was too derivative, especially with Star Wars, because they say he ripped off the planets. And I've heard it. I think
Ripped
it's,
off.
yeah, I've heard the planets, and I can see their point, but I don't concede that that's what happened. John Williams did not rip it off. He changed it. It is his own thing.
Ripped off.
And
You think Peter Jackson ripped off J.R. Tolkien?
no,
Do you think the guy that invented color TV ripped off the guy that invented black and white TV? I
I'm
mean, come
not
on.
saying that John Williams.
We all rip off everything. We are an evolving species with an evolving mindset and evolving culture. And evolution means that we're starting not from scratch, but from what we were given. John Williams is no exception.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he ripped off anyone. I love John Williams. Like I
I
said,
get it.
I put him up there on a pedestal just as much as I would put Mozart or Beethoven. But there are people who have argued that, and they say they don't like John
Yeah.
Williams, and that's
Well,
their opinion. But I definitely disagree with it.
they're entitled.
Yeah.
They're entitled, but they're wrong.
Um. All
And on
right.
that note,
Yeah. So I hope that everyone has liked our talk. Um, Once again, I was saying this before, but just in case, if you are free to leave a comment and tell us what we did right, tell us what we did wrong. I'm sure there are going to be people who don't like us and who want to insult us. I would rather that you didn't, even if at the very least, I would like you to be respectful. If that is in your capacity. If it isn't, then you aren't really worth talking about, and I'm not going to acknowledge you. Uh, Also, for those of you who
nice,
do like
Josh.
us, for those of you who do like us, if you have constructive criticism, things that you suggest we do, things that you might be able to recommend for how to work around the internet problem, which could be an issue with sound, um, those suggestions are definitely welcome. And if you have differing opinions, but you can talk about them respectfully, you're definitely welcome here. And I would love to hear what you guys think. Vern, do you have anything else to add? Or,
Stay tuned next time for the striking back of the Empire.
but, yep, that's going to be in well, probably a week. We're still working on the timelines, but right
We're
now
gonna
I'm
try
looking
to
at,
produce them once a week.
yeah,
We'll see.
and I'm looking to publish them on Fridays. So we'll see how that works, but that's right now the goal is to publish them on Fridays. So I guess that's it.
That's a wrap.
I
May the
will.
force be with
May the
you.
force be with you. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next time. This has been Cyber Conversations, and I'm Josh, and you heard Vern. Thanks a lot.